Okay, so let's talk about Vladimir Putin, because lately he's been saying, well, a lot. One minute he's talking energy sanctions, the next it's about these super advanced missiles, and the signals he's sending out to the world, they seem to be all over the place, and honestly, pretty contradictory. It's creating a ton of headlines, but also a whole lot of confusion. So let's try and make sense of it. And that really brings us to the big question, right? What is Vladimir Putin actually signaling to the world? Is there a grand strategy behind all this noise? Is he actually changing his policies, or is this just a bunch of bluster, empty threats? Or, is it something else completely? Let's dig into what the analysts are saying. So this all came to a head at a recent economic summit, and you can bet Putin's message was aimed squarely at the West. He hit on all the big flashpoints. We're talking Ukraine, NATO, the works.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Analysts are pointing out that he's not just talking to the West like it's one big blob. Nope. He's got a very clear split in his messaging. It's like he's running two different campaigns for two very different audiences, Europe and the United States.
And believe me, he is treating these two old allies in completely different ways. Let's really break down that contrast.
I mean, look at this. It really lays out the two sides of Putin's coin. For Europe, the message is clear. You're the adversary. You're the ones escalating this whole thing. But for the US, particularly a US under Trump, the message is totally different. Suddenly, they're a potential partner, someone he can actually have a dialogue with.
And this isn't just an interpretation. He said it himself. When it comes to Europe, he says it's folly, even ridiculous, to think Russia would ever attack NATO. He's basically throwing it back in their face, accusing them of making up a threat and using it to stoke the fire. Okay, now flip that around and look at what he says about Donald Trump. He's got nothing but praise, saying Trump communicates his interests and desires directly with no hypocrisy. See what he's doing? He's signaling that there's a path for negotiation there, a path that he implies just doesn't exist with leaders in Europe. So where does this all lead? Well, it leads to what one analyst called the big headline coming out of that whole summit. Putin's stated goal is to restore full-fledged relations with the United States. So the takeaway here is pretty huge. He's putting up a wall with Europe while simultaneously trying to build a bridge across the Atlantic to Washington. And this whole double message strategy, it becomes crystal clear when you look at the debate over one specific thing, sending advanced long-range missiles to Ukraine. This is where all the talk and rhetoric meets cold, hard reality. So, what are we actually talking about with a Tomahawk missile? Well, this isn't just any old rocket. We're talking about a serious long-range cruise missile. This thing can strike targets deep inside enemy territory, carrying a warhead that weighs up to 2,000 pounds. It's a massive, massive leap in military capability. And you can kind of see how we got here. The U.S. started by providing the shorter-range HIMARS. Then came the ATACMS, which could go further, about 180 to 200 miles. But Tomahawks, they're in a whole other league. They represent a deep strike capability that would cross a huge red line, and that's exactly why they're still just under discussion. And Putin, for his part, has made his feelings on this perfectly clear. He's not mincing words. He's called the idea of Ukraine getting Tomahawks a potential game changer and a significant escalation. I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than that. It's a red line. Which, of course, raises a really fascinating question. Is all this talk in Washington about sending these missiles for real? Or is it all just part of a much bigger strategic chess game? Well, one analysis suggests it's exactly that. A high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The thinking goes like this. Maybe you don't actually have to send the missiles. Maybe just the threat of sending them is the real weapon. It becomes a tool for leverage, a way to put psychological pressure on Putin and maybe, just maybe, force him to the negotiating table. But this kind of strategic move, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. Analysts point out that this fits right into a familiar pattern. You could almost call it Putin's provocation playbook for how he deals with the West. And that cycle is pretty predictable. Step 1, the act. A Russian drone or jet enters NATO airspace, something provocative. Step 2, the denial. Putin dismisses the West's reaction as contrived hysteria. And finally, step 3, the analysis. Experts see this for what it is, a classic tactic of provoking someone and then turning around and blaming them for reacting. Yeah, this quote from a news analyst just nails it. He issues a provocation or he conducts a provocation, then he tries to put the blame on the nation that he's provoking. It's a deliberate playbook we've seen happen over and over again.
And when you look at how to respond to these provocations, you see two completely different worlds. On the one hand, you have Putin's narrative, which is that this is all just hysteria cooked up by the West to distract from their own problems. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump's reported position, which is just shoot them down. I mean, you can't get a more stark contrast than that.
So, after all of this, we're left with the ultimate question, aren't we? All these mixed signals, the threats aimed at Europe, the open door to the US, the red lines drawn over missiles, what does it all mean? Is Putin actually preparing for a wider conflict? Or is this whole thing just a really elaborate, high-stakes chess match designed to force a deal, but on his terms? That's the billion-dollar question, and honestly, the entire world is waiting to see the answer.